I feel like a large problem of why we see so many digestive issues is honestly, most of us are eating 15, 16 hours a day, like grazing all day, right? And you obviously know this because you're blood sugar queen, it's like, just like blood sugar, it's like we have to understand our digestive system needs a break.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. I am so excited to start putting my videos on YouTube for you all. And today I have an amazing part one of a really long, awesome interview with my good friend, Jennilyn Griffiths. And she is someone who has specialized in gut health and neurotransmitters for several years. She started as a personal trainer way back 10 years ago, and she got really deep into fixing imbalances in the body with a holistic approach to nutrition, supplementation, and behavioral change. We saw each other a couple of months ago now at KetoCon, and we stayed in a house with some other people, and we were just nerding out on gut health and digestion and all these things and how this really relates to our blood sugar. We know that the gut is such a foundation for our health, and we know that it has really far-reaching impacts into our entire health of our whole body and all sorts of symptoms. Like when my gut was a mess, I had terrible allergies and asthma and sinus infections. That's how my gut issues sort of showed up for me. But for other people, it could show up as joint pain. For other people, it could show up as migraines. So what happens in our gut doesn't stay in our gut, and it's really, really important to learn how to best take care of your gut. Our gut health also has huge impacts on our blood sugar. So certain types of gut bacteria and bacterial balances or imbalances can really affect our metabolic health and our blood sugar. So this is such an amazing conversation with Jennilyn. I can't wait to dive in. So before that, I just want to thank our sponsors for today's episode. Good idea. If you guys haven't heard me talk about this, you would think that I created this because it's so up my alley. It is a sparkling water that actually lowers your blood sugar response from a meal by 20 to 30%. And it doesn't taste bad like apple cider vinegar. Actually, all their flavors are amazingly good. I'm really loving the strawberry elderflower, which is their new one. I love the lemon one. It's so refreshing and hydrating in the summertime, and this is something that you can bring with you to the beach, to a barbecue, to a picnic, to a gathering, and you won't look weird. You're not like taking out a bottle of apple cider vinegar and like drinking it. You are drinking a normal seltzer. So you drink 1/3 of it before the meal, and then you finish drinking the rest throughout the meal, and you get those amazing blood sugar lowering benefits or stabilizing benefits. And we know that stable blood sugar helps us to feel more energized, helps us have better sleep at night, and reduces our risk for all sorts of issues, and just helps us feel better in so many ways. We have more stable moods, fewer cravings. So obviously, stable blood sugar is why we're here on this channel, but this is an amazing tool that can help us keep those blood sugar levels stable. So check out Good Idea. I put all the info below in this video, but it's goodidea.us, and you can use the code DannyHealth to get 10% off your first order. If you try it, let me know if you love it. All right, everybody, let's dive into the episode with Jennilyn Griffiths. Jennilyn, I am so excited to welcome you to the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. Thanks for being here.
Yes, me too. I'm so excited. I've been wanting to be on this ever since I met you last year at KetoCon. I was like, we are similar minds, gut girls,
Yes, so connected. And we met last year at KetoCon, and then this year we were both speakers at KetoCon and hung out together, stayed in an Airbnb together, and it was so much fun getting to chat with you. We were nerding out on all things gut health, and I spoke about digestion at KetoCon, and you spoke about gut health, and so I'm so excited to bring this conversation to our listeners and have them be the fly on the wall and listening into all this amazing stuff that you've been learning. So I would love to learn just a little bit more about your background, about your story, and so why don't we start there?
Yes, this is a great place to start. So I feel like anyone that's in this industry that's like super passionate like me and you probably came about it because of our own story, you know, which is definitely true for me too. So my journey honestly began when I was a teenager. I had major gut issues, right? And you got to realize back then, leaky gut really wasn't talked about at all. Like I started talking about leaky gut probably at least like 8 years ago, which it still probably wasn't. Now it's more common, right? But I had these debilitating gut issues. I was about 14. I would literally get sick like every time I ate, and I'd have to go home from school. So what I started doing is, in order to manage it, be able to go to school, I just like would skip breakfast, go to school, and then I would get so either like sick or hungry or, that by the time I got to lunch, I would eat and then I'd get terribly sick and have to go home. And this is like a repeated thing. And when I'm saying sick, it was like literally cramping, like doubling over kind of pain, right?
Aww.
And the worst part was like the school attendants didn't even like believe me. And they're like, "Oh, we think she's like making it up to go home." And I'm like, why would I like want to leave school every day and go home and do nothing? You know, like it was just, anyway, it was silly, but like, I'm sure I have a similar story to a lot of people where I went to a doctor, they diagnosed me with IBS, which me and you both know that's the most stupid, like, just think about the word, like literally like, what's wrong with you? Your bowels are irritable. And you're like, yeah, I could have told you that. I could definitely tell you that my bowels are irritable.
So tell people who might not know, why does IBS, as irritable bowel syndrome, as a diagnosis, why are we sort of laughing at it?
Yes. No, that's great. It's a great question. So just so people know, IBS stands for irritable bowel syndrome, right? It is super freaking prominent in the world. It's literally 1 out of 7 people have it. But you have to realize it is not a diagnosis. It literally is just a collection of symptoms. So that's why it's known as a syndrome, like PCOS, right? So a collection of symptoms means that you have cramping, bloating, gas, and irregular bowel movements, whether that's constipation or diarrhea. That's literally the diagnosis for what IBS is. So really what it is we don't know what the F is wrong with you. We're just going to put you in a category that says we don't know what's wrong with you, but we know that your bowels are irritable.
Right, exactly. So it's really just like the best they could do to tell you something that you already know, and there's no exact,
Yes.
They're not giving you a reason for it. They're not giving you any sort of actual diagnosis. They're just like, whoops. So
Exactly.
It's like a nothing diagnosis.
It is. And listen, and I'm 15, right? And I'm like, I still remember when they told me, like there was like 2 doctors there and they said irritable bowel syndrome. And I looked at them and I was like, okay, so what's making my bowels irritable? And they just like looked at each other. They were like, we don't know. And I'm like, okay, wait, I feel like something's wrong that I'm 15 and I'm asking these questions. Like, how is no one else asking these questions? You know what I mean? Yeah. So it sent me on a journey where after that, I did get into a GI specialist because they weren't GI specialists. They were just regular doctors. I got into a GI specialist, and honestly, that was like the most disappointing part because I thought that this was going to be like my saving grace is getting into a GI. And when I got into her, she literally put me on antibiotics, and not only 1 dose, not 2 doses, 3 doses, but 4 doses in a row, literally. She put me on 4 doses of antibiotics back to back in a row.
Oh my
because
gosh.
I took 1 dose. I told her I don't feel any better. She did no testing, by the way, no stool test, no blood test, nothing. Just like listen to my symptoms. Oh yeah, here's an antibiotic, you know? Literally put me on 1 dose. I didn't feel better. Put me on a 2nd dose. I was like starting to question when I'm on all these doses, but honestly, I'm 15 and I'm like trusting this like gastroenterologist that like so I think I learned a hard lesson back then that if you really care about your health, you have to take accountability for your health. You can't trust the guy or the girl in the lab coat just because they went to medical school, because they don't really have, at least I felt like it, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm alone in this, that I felt like I was just passed around. I don't feel like they really heard me, understood me, asked questions, did testing, like nothing. It was just like, here's drugs, here's drugs, here's drugs. And then I end up in this like terrible place after 4 doses of antibiotics. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So can I share one little tidbit of information that fits in right here? So I went to school with someone who graduated to become a gastroenterologist, and she was in school up until like 2 years ago. So I'm 37. She was probably in school till she was 35, continuing after college, like in medical school. So I'm just saying this because she was studying for a long, long time. Graduated, GI doctor. She finishes graduation, and I have an email. I have a DM in my inbox saying, "Hey, I was just wondering if you could send me some studies or some books or anything about nutrition, because we really didn't learn that in school." I got like goosebumps on my body. I'm like, oh my goodness. She's asking me. I have a certificate in nutrition, and I feel like I know a decent amount. But like she's asking me for help or for information she didn't learn about food. Imagine a gastroenterologist, a doctor who's studying the digestive tract, not learning about what's going inside of the digestive tract. Like it just mind-boggling. So if you are listening and you're like, I keep going from GI to GI, just like you, getting bounced around, not getting listened to, not finding answers, it's because it's not her fault, this person who was being trained. It's obviously the system in which they're being trained. They are not being taught the information that we need to heal, right? So that's pretty,
yes.
So we have to go do it on our own.
Yeah. You are 1000% right. So now that I've been in this industry a while, I have tons of friends that are doctors, right? So when I say to people like, oh, I don't like doctors, it's the Western medicine system, like you said, right? I have doctors that are brilliant friends, but they understand nutrition because they learned nutrition outside of medical school because they don't learn it in medical school.
Unreal.
Thank you for bringing that up. Like, it's amazing to me that we're learning about the human body and particularly the digestive system, which food goes in. And like you said, they don't even understand food. It's like the craziest.
Or they'll say food doesn't, I'm sorry to interrupt you. They'll say food, it doesn't matter what you eat. I've heard people say that about their doctors. Say, oh, well, it doesn't matter what you eat. I think it does.
You're like, I'm pretty sure our cells and our everything is made out of what we eat. So I think it does. I think it matters.
I think it matters
just a little bit, you know? And that's what's so funny is like when I was having those major issues, I was always getting sick after food. And back then I was eating gluten. Like it was the most obvious thing of like, remove the gluten, right? And like, once we know what we know, of course it's by food. Like how would food not cause inflammation or cause health? Like,
right.
We understand that's just like chemistry.
Yeah.
Like
your digestive tract is fine when nothing's in it. And then once you put something in it, there's an issue. Yeah. So how does your story end? What happens next?
Yeah. So like, I mean, I'll be honest with people, like because I was 15 and I didn't have a lot of resources, it took me a while to figure out what was going on with me. I don't think I really did till an adult.
Yeah.
But I just started trying doing things myself. I honestly started listening to podcasts, reading books. I did eliminate gluten finally. That helped. I eliminated dairy. It's fine because I do fine with dairy now, but I've also healed leaky gut. So that makes sense, right? But I did remove some foods that were problematic. I started doing intermittent fasting, which I'm very big fan of for people that aren't trying that. It's a very good way to give your digestive system a break from food so it can actually focus on healing. I feel like a large problem of why we see so many digestive issues is honestly, most of us are eating 15, 16 hours a day, like grazing all day, right? And you obviously know this because you're blood sugar queen, it's like, just like blood sugar, it's like we have to understand our digestive system needs a break, right? So I'm huge on the microbiome. You know this, I'm like obsessed. And there literally is microbiome that is day microbiome that helps you digest food and B vitamins and make GABA. And then there's night microbiome. Literally, there's two different, I don't know if people know this, but there's two different microbiomes. One becomes active in the day and one becomes active at night. And when you're eating, you confuse those microbiomes because let's say you eat at 10 p.m. and go to bed. Well, then your active day ones come out because they have to ferment the food and they have to, start the process of digestion. So I really think we're doing ourselves a big disservice, which I also was doing back then, is like eating a bowl of cereal late. Like that's just really, really problematic for the digestive tract.
Okay. So already with the bomb of knowledge right here, this is so groundbreaking, I feel like, all right, let's circle back with intermittent fasting. A lot of people think, this has come to my knowledge lately, that a lot of people think that intermittent fasting means skip breakfast. And
I know.
And that's because that's what they hear, and that's totally fine. So we just want to clear up that intermittent fasting means just condensing your eating window. And based on what Jennilyn just told us, and for a lot of other reasons, I personally recommend when we intermittent fast to squish our eating window to earlier in the day. So that means wake up, eat breakfast. This is more aligned with our circadian rhythm. And then we should be finished eating our dinner earlier. And that way we can fast before bed just a little bit, a couple of hours. And then that gives our night bugs a chance to come out. And I find that when I eat too close to bed, I have an Oura Ring. It's a sleep tracker. Yeah, and my Oura Ring gets so mad at me. It gets like really sassy, and it's like, oh, your heart rate was elevated all night. Did you eat something too close to bed? I was like, how do you know? How do you know? It knows.
I know, you can't escape. It does know. Yeah. It's like really accurate.
Yeah. So that is amazing, an amazing piece of information already that a lot of us, would do better to move our eating earlier in the day and do more fasting in the evening time. Now, I work with a lot of people who have reactive hypoglycemia and who need to eat all the time and need to eat a little bit before bed. But obviously that is just a temporary thing that we want to do, and the goal is to heal so that we don't have to eat that often. So some people, if you're hearing this, it's okay, we're working towards that goal of being able to not have to eat before bed, but that is a good goal to keep in mind. So
Yes.
Did you want to share something else about it?
I was just going to say, I love what you just said. What I want to add to the whole intermittent fasting piece is I actually kind of like now to call it time restricted eating or time restricted window, right? Because I think sometimes when you say intermittent fasting, people get this idea of like, oh, I can't fast, right? And I'm like, dude, it's not fasting. It really isn't. It's just a time restricted window, right? So I do like to call it time restricted eating because it's like, you can still eat your 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 calories in that window and you won't be hungry. I promise. When you adapt to this, like you don't feel starving. It's not like you're dieting, right? But you're really just compressing the window because biologically speaking, we are not supposed to be digesting food all day. We're not set up for that. I think people underestimate the power and the amount of work that goes into one meal of digestion. Truly, like me and you both know, right? All the juices that go in place, all the enzymes, the bile, the pancreatic enzymes. So it's like, if you're wanting your body to do that every 2 hours, it's very stressful, like it is very stressful to the body.
It is. And it doesn't leave time for one thing. For example, I was telling this in my group the other day, if we're grazing all the time, which I used to do always because I was preventing blood sugar lows, right? So I would naturally graze throughout the day. And one thing that is really important that happens is, especially if we're eating fat, because now we know like embrace healthy fats and all these things, our liver makes bile and it fills up our gallbladder, right? And so then we have a meal and it squeezes all that bile out to help digest the fats in your first meal. Now, the liver can only fill up the bile, like the gallbladder, so much. And so if we're eating all the time, we're not getting sufficient amount of these digestive juices and things at our meals, right? And then the other part is we have to stop eating so that the digestive tract can repair, right? Because it's a really I'm sure we're jumping ahead, but it's also a very inflammatory process to eat, right? Or it can be.
Yes. And especially if you have leaky gut, it's a very inflammatory process to eat.
Yeah. So
like for 5 hours, you have elevated LPS for 5 hours.
Okay. Let's jump into leaky gut. Tell us what it is.
Yeah, let's do it.
Does it exist? Because the naysayers will say leaky gut doesn't even exist. And
yes. Yeah. No, let's get into it. Cause honestly, I would say leaky gut is my main focus. I do a lot of SIBO and Candida as well, but I really, really think that leaky gut is the start to most metabolic disease. I really me and you have talked about this stuff, but it's okay, so leaky gut, let me just give people a explanation, right? So, I'll just do a quick anatomy lesson. So you eat food, it goes in your mouth, goes down your esophagus, goes into your stomach. So when I say gut issues, by the way, a lot of people think stomach, right?
Yeah.
But I do want to point to people that most of gut issues are actually in the small intestine, to be honest. They really are. I would say, there's some stomach issues. We can go into that. But the majority of what people are dealing with, I would say, is a small intestinal issue or large intestine, right? We'll say the intestines in general. The small intestine is 20 feet in length, 20 feet. Which is insane, right? If you think about every person's walking around with literally, if you laid out the intestines, the actual surface area, it would fill up a tennis court. Yes,
because
truly.
Of all the villi, right?
Yeah, I mean just the surface area. Yeah, because the villi have villi too. I don't know.
The microvilli.
Even have.
I call them hairy fingers, so they look like hairy fingers, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So we get more surface area so we can absorb more, right?
Wow.
But think about how detrimental it would be if those 20 feet get compromised, right? So 90% of our absorption of our food happens in our small intestine. We really don't absorb food through our stomach or our large intestine. Right. Large intestine is meant for fermentation, right? So so you can have leaky gut in your small intestine and your large intestine, by the way.
Didn't know that.
You can, yes. And pretty much what leaky gut is I know people not everyone's watching, but you have these really tight junctions. And I usually like to show people an image, but you have tight junctions that should stay tight, right?
She's putting
and they
her
shouldn't
fingers
allow
together. Yeah. Interlocking her fingers. Yeah.
they shouldn't allow food to get out of the intestines into the bloodstream. That's very, the body does not like that. So let's just go there. So if you have leaky gut and these junctions are open, right? What happens is when we eat food, undigested food particles can go enter into the bloodstream, and then the immune system will create, oh my gosh, like foreign invader, like alert, alert, alert. It's a big deal. Like, I don't think people understand. It's a big deal. The body does not want undigested food in the bloodstream at all. Okay. So then let's say you eat an almond. It's a good food. And you have leaky gut and you get this huge inflammatory response. So when I say inflammation, your immune system sends off these signals to inflammatory cytokines, right? So we've noticed with leaky gut, IL-6, TNF alpha, IL-18, they all go up. So people can even test, obviously, their blood and they can see these elevated markers. And if those stay elevated a long time, this is going to lead to more of an autoimmune picture. Okay?
What are those markers?
So,
what are in the most basic
like
form?
IL-6.
Yeah.
Like IL-6 is elevated if you have inflammation. C-reactive protein usually gets elevated. Interleukin 18, TNF alpha. Like we see these same pro-inflammatory cytokines get elevated with leaky gut.
They're pro-inflammatory cytokines. Got it. So they're just
exactly.
They're molecules that drive inflammation in the body.
Yes.
And they're in the
think about
term.
it starting a fire kind of.
Ooh.
Like it really is kind of igniting a fire of this inflammation, right?
Yeah.
Because it is a threat to the immune system. Mm-hmm. Your body considers it a threat. So that's the first threat that can happen. The second one is that as these junctions become loose, and then we actually have what's called a mucosal layer that's around the intestines. So we have a big, thick mucosal layer. And when I say mucus, people are like, ew, gross. I'm like, no. Like mucus is good. I promise. Like you need a mucosal layer. A lot of your immune system is actually mucus. Like we trap viruses in mucus. We trap fungus. We trap bacteria. Like we need mucus. We produce 2 liters of mucus per day.
That's so
Isn't that crazy?
Gross, but good. You know,
it is like, it sounds gross, but like, again, think about, guys, you need mucus layers.
Yeah,
so
it's like not having
mucus layer,
saliva in your mouth or like moisture in your nose. It's not going to go well for you if it's completely dry. Well. Yeah.
Yeah. So as this mucus layer gets degraded, mm-hmm. right, that happens with leaky gut. Well, the mucus layer is keeping pathogens from entering the small intestine. So we have pathogens that are around the mucus layer, but the mucus layer keeps them protected to never go in the small intestine. Yeah. Okay. Because just so you guys know, we're not supposed to have a lot of bacteria in the small intestine. We're not. There's a really small amount, but you'll learn later as I talk about SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, most of our microbiome is supposed to be in our large intestine because they're meant to ferment our food. Again, we're supposed to absorb our food in our small intestine, so we don't want a lot of fermenting happening there, right? So as this mucus layer gets degraded, what happens is these bacteria can actually enter the small intestine. They can come through the tight junctions, and usually they are gram-negative bacteria, which produce an endotoxin called lipopolysaccharide, LPS for short. You guys will hear a lot. I know it sounds like a big word. It's really not. But you guys will hear a lot more talk of LPS because we are tying LPS with like every systemic disease. It's really incredible right now.
Do a quick review of the LPS. How does that get created? Yes. Give us one more walkthrough.
Good question. So in our microbiome, so if you guys know, so the microbiome is like 100 trillion little microorganisms that exist inside of us. Okay. So we are more bacteria than we are human by far. So our microbiome, they help with every process from immune function. They create neurotransmitters for us. They create B vitamins. They help digest our food. I mean, so many genetic capacities, I can't even begin. But what happens is all these organisms are supposed to be in certain orders, right? So like we have what's called gram-negative bacteria and gram-positive bacteria. We do notice that gram-negative bacteria, some of the more pathogenic species, so the not friendly ones, right? So there's good guys and bad guys kind of. They all have to do with balance. But when we get overgrown amount of gram-negative bacteria, which is like dysbiosis, they produce an endotoxin. So think about they have a toxic byproduct, just like we have a bowel movement, mm-hmm. right? They have a byproduct, which is LPS, lipopolysaccharide. As they release this lipopolysaccharide, it was very inflammatory to us. It really causes a lot of inflammation. I mean, we're tying these inflammatory cytokines I just talked about. That's really highly due to LPS.
Yeah. And can I just say one quick thing? Please. LPS and interleukin 6, so these inflammatory molecules can be a hidden cause of reactive hypoglycemia. And that is a new thing that we're learning, and not many people know this. So this is directly tied, and we're going to talk more about blood sugar, but this stuff is directly tied to our metabolism, and for some people it can make huge impacts. So we're not just talking about like bacteria poop here. It's like really yeah. But so these inflammatory substances can really wreak havoc all over the body, right? Not just in the intestines, especially if we have leaky gut, right? And it's seeping out. Is that how it works?
That's a great question, because what we know now is it's called translocation of LPS. Ooh. Yes, it does happen. So the gut is actually connected to every other organ in the body. The gut is connected to the brain by the vagal nerve. It's connected to the liver. It's connected to the thyroid. It's connected to the heart. So what we've noticed in research is if you have leaky gut and you're releasing a lot of LPS, that can translocate to another organ like your thyroid and start causing Hashimoto's.
Wow.
That can go to your liver and start causing fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That can go to your brain and start causing inflammation of the brain, which would be depression, anxiety, any neurodegenerative disease, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, brain fog, right? Yeah. So we're seeing that this LPS picture is actually way bigger than we ever realized. And it's causing, even when you have inflammation of your joints, arthritis, that's going to your joints. Like it can translocate anywhere if it starts in the gut. And that's the problem. People think it stays centralized. It doesn't.
Yeah.
We've even done I'm big on mental health, right? That's what I spoke about at KetoCon is the gut brain axis. Yeah. There's tons of research that the higher amounts of LPS, higher amounts of anxiety. Like you can't ignore this stuff. It's like very like in the open. So when people say leaky gut's not real, I'm like, do you know how to read chemistry? I don't know how you're saying it's not real.
Yeah. Such great information. So is there more to the story? Because I'm like riveted right now.
Yeah, sorry, okay. I know. I get I'm like ADD, so I'm all over the place.
No.
Okay, so back to my
great.
story.
It's great, yeah.
Obviously I didn't, just so you guys know, I did not discover LPS and microbiome back then. No, I did not. That's been in my recent years. But as I've been able, so kind of fast forward to, like I said, it was a slow process to heal. I'll be honest. Like I kind of had pieces to the puzzle, tried different things. I ended up doing a lot better just by going to like Whole Foods, and I became a personal trainer. So I understood the basics of nutrition as far as like not having too many carbs. I did actually go ketogenic, like before almost anyone else did. I think I went keto first in 2013 or something. I think it was like 2013,
wow.
2014 when I first started hearing about it. And I heard the research from Dr. Dominic D'Agostino. Yeah. I helped with his conference, Metabolic Health Summit. Anyway, and I just started, honestly, I would say that is a huge contributor that helped my gut, is because I didn't know back then, but I know now that I did have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And when you have that and you're eating carbs, oh my gosh, it is not fun. You're going to get major bloating. You're going to get major indigestion because those carbs ferment in the small intestine and they don't create good, you don't feel good, right? You have brain fog, you got anxiety, depression. So by me just eliminating carbohydrates helped a lot, because that stops feeding SIBO, right? The small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So they diminish. And then I would say it's been an ongoing process now. So I found keto, did some repairing there. But honestly, I did have fat malabsorption as well. So it's like I've had to address that. So it's like you kind of come across, it's like, again, there's steps to the healing journey. I would say I'm even still on it. Like, I feel like me and you are both like, okay, well, how good can we get? Do we still, me and you talked at the conference, like I still might have a little H. pylori. I might, like you have to realize,
I can't get rid of this
perfect.
thing.
Like, we just know about this stuff, right? But the more I learn about it, I guess the more excited I get, because the research is really cool out there, guys. And I think we're putting together a lot of the pieces to this like root cause picture. But I just want people to know, like, you're not alone if you have gut issues. It's literally like, I think it's a couple of the research I've seen says 1 out of 4 actually people have gut issues, which I would not I would think that would be accurate. I
I
mean,
think
because if you say
it's
gut issues,
so
that could be
much.
liver, gallbladder, pancreas, like,
I
Yeah,
feel
what were
like
you gonna say?
I feel like it's even more because everyone I see, like almost no one I see has sufficient stomach acid. And they all
Yes.
have, people are sensitive to foods, and we have to think about what's in our food landscape. So, you already talked about gluten. Would you mind sharing a little bit about why gluten is so detrimental to our gut and why it's not
Yes.
this like over exaggeration of like being gluten free and why it is actually important for so many people?
Yes, that's a great question because I am not a fan of gluten. I'll be honest, I don't think it's a hype thing. If you genetic, I mean, again, you can do a test to see if you're celiac, right? A lot of people that do the test are celiac. Like they are actually genetically allergic to gluten. So it's not even just, so gluten, it's a protein in wheat, right? But it's gliadin. It's the protein is in wheat that people are obviously reacting to. But it's a very high percentage of the US, to be honest, that actually are like, can test and are genetically not able to handle gluten. But I would argue that even if you tested that you say that you're not celiac, a lot of people are sensitive to gluten. It just is very inflammatory to a lot of people, right? We have seen that gluten itself can create leaky gut in a lot of
Because it
people, right? It
increases
just
zonulin, right?
zonulin, yes, yes, it definitely increases zonulin and it opens the tight junctions,
Yeah,
right?
that's what zonulin
Um,
does. It
so
opens the tight junctions and basically gives you leaky gut after you eat it. And then I heard from, I think it was from Dr. Tom O'Brien, who's like the gluten guru. He
yeah,
talks about how everyone sort of has that zonulin response to gluten where you basically get leaky gut right after you eat it. But that's where some of these individual variations come in where some people their tight junctions close right back up and other people stay open
yes,
for like days, weeks, months. So
yes.
that's where a lot of people where it's like even one bite of gluten can really derail you for quite a while, and that's why they say like you can't, just like you can't be a little bit pregnant, you can't be a little bit gluten free because it sets off that whole cascade and the zonulin
Yes.
cascade in your body. So yeah.
And I love that you brought that up because yeah, so zonulin, I mean, now it's natural for our tight junctions to be able to open and close. I do want people to know that.
Okay.
It's not like they always stay closed, okay? I used to believe that and then I've learned a little bit more. But there a lot of that opening and closing information is actually controlled by microbes.
Ooh.
So it's not just zonulin, it's actual microbiome. There's certain keystone species that are known, like Akkermansia mesonephila is one of them. It instructs how to close and open those tight junctions and when to do so. But the problem with gluten, like you said, is a lot of people, even if they're like, yeah, I don't eat a lot of gluten, just here and there. I'm like, oh, if you ate it just a little bit, you could cause that leaky gut for, like you said, days,
Mm-hmm.
right? It could be open for days. And then all of a sudden, and I don't think people associate, like they're like, I do fine with gluten, but do you get headaches after you eat? Do you get tired after you eat? Do you get skin issues? Like, I think people sometimes associate, if I'm allergic to gluten, I'll get like diarrhea right after. No, that's not the case, guys.
I
Like, it is not. Some people react like that, but some people just get headaches. Some people it ruins. It can give them like cramping. There's so
joint
many different
issues.
symptoms,
Yeah. I
joints.
always say that digestive issues do not always lead to digestive symptoms. So the gut, like Jenny was saying, is connected to every organ and has impacts, like especially if you have a leaky gut, what happens in the gut doesn't stay in the gut if it's leaking out everywhere, right? So we get these inflammatory molecules traveling throughout our body, and I feel that this is where we may get these sort of what we're genetically predisposed to. So if we have leaky gut and this inflammation process happening, is that this is my theory that that's where we start to see these patterns start happening. So for me, my flavor of leaky gut, so to speak, was I had really bad allergies, asthma, and sinus infections. I also got a lot of tendinitis. So it was like inflammatory, but it was mostly like ear, nose, throat, lung stuff, right? And then other people might get, everyone in their family gets migraines and they get migraines, or everyone in their family gets arthritis or some version of joint issues, right? Or a lot of people in their families get cardiovascular issues. So that's sort of where we see those different flavors, but the root cause is this inflammation and, these gut issues, leaky gut. Would you say, do you feel
Oh
on the same
yeah,
page
I
with
would
that?
100% agree because you're totally right. A lot of people would not associate allergies or sinus infections with gut issues. They're 100% with gut issues, guys. Like, I think somewhere along the way, we just believed that like just diarrhea and constipation had to do with digestion, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't think we truly understand that your metabolism, your digestive system is how we literally transform food into energy.
Yeah.
So it's like, why would that not affect every system in the body if you think about it? You know what I mean? Like, of course it would affect how you sleep. Of course it'll affect your mental health. Of course it'll affect your skin health. Of course it'll affect your hormone health. Of course it'll affect your blood sugar. Like, and I love that you brought up blood sugar, by the way, because I've been since I've been keto for so long, and by the way, guys, like I'm more like a low carb cyclical keto now.
Same
I do
here.
believe for the gut micro. Oh yeah, I was going to say, because I think there's a time and place to get your blood sugar and your insulin down for sure. But I'm to a place where I am more insulin sensitive now. Mm-hmm. And honestly, bringing some sweet potatoes back in has been so good for me. I just feel better. I sleep better. I think that people, if they do keto for too long, that's very strict. I do think it can affect your gut microbiome. And I don't just think that, I know that actually.
I'm so happy you're
by
saying
seeing
this.
tests.
Yeah. And same thing with
like, guys,
carnivore.
like
even worse.
And again, I'm fan of carnivore for short term, as in like maybe like 8 weeks to like drop some. It's kind of, to me, it's like an elimination diet, right? So you can use carnivore as a tool, maybe for a short time, to eliminate these food allergies that you have. But you got to bring some fiber back in, because your gut microbiome are starving. They can't eat meat. Like I mean, yes, there is some microbiome that are responsible for protein fermentation. But to be honest, the problem that I see is I use this stool test a lot, the microbiome biome effects genetic stool test. And I see that when people do carnivore, their protein fermentation gets really high, which actually produces these off gases called polyamines that are very inflammatory to the gut. It can also we start to see ammonia go up, which can be inflammatory to the gut as well as the liver and the kidneys. We can see histamine go up, right? So like, I do think, again, we're in the community. There's a lot of people that are carnivore, and I don't want to say there's not a time and a place for it. But do I think people should stay on it long term? No, I don't.
Right.
I really don't. I just got to be honest with that. And the literature also kind of is behind me on that if you lose diversity of microbiome, right? So this is the problem when we come to microbiome. Like I said, guys, imagine that you have literally 100 trillion microorganisms, and they are doing a lot more for you than you think they are, right? They have jobs just like we do. Like you could have a microbiome, and their job is to create GABA that makes you feel calm, and it can calm your stress response. So if you take an antibiotic and you lose all those species, guess what happens? Now you can't calm down very well. Now anxiety starts to increase. Now you can't sleep very well because GABA has been disrupted. So people are not.
And now you're emotionally eating carbs to give you the actual some neurochemicals to help calm you, and then you get the more overgrowth, and it can snowball. So we can keep connecting this to, like, it can keep snowballing. It's like how many people after eating and after taking an antibiotic, and then you get the overgrowth of the candida and all these things. I mean, it can snowball intensely.
Very common.
Yeah.
I mean, it's highly common for, just so you guys know, so bacteria make up most of our microbiome, okay? So we do have fungus too, and we do have viruses, and we have archaea. Those are the 4 that make up the microbiome. But bacteria is kind of like, in my eyes, bacteria rules everything. It rules viruses. It kind of rules fungus. So what happens is after an antibiotic use, we see a lot of people get candida. All of a sudden, you've killed all these good bacteria that were keeping the fungus in check, and now there's like no one to keep the fungus in check. And then all of a sudden, like, how many women have taken antibiotics and gotten a yeast infection? Super common, right? How many women have taken or women or men that take an antibiotic and then they get a strep throat, and then they get a sinus infection, right? Because every time you're taking an antibiotic, you're actually diminishing your immune system because you're losing microbes that help your immune system. It's like, I think that we need to I try to do this all the time, where I educate about antibiotics, because they can really be harmful. Like, I want people to understand there's a time and place for them. Yes, if they're going to save your life because your leg's infected, take them. But if you're just like, I think I got a little, sore throat, might be strep, I guess I'll just take it. Do you guys know that 50% of antibiotics, according to the CDC, are unnecessary? 50% of prescriptions of antibiotics are unnecessary, guys. That's like to me, that's like malpractice. Like,
100%. And for anyone who's thinking, oh my gosh, I've taken so many antibiotics in my lifetime, I also have. I have taken so many countless rounds of antibiotics in my life, and this is why I still struggle with gut issues. And so I was having lots of ear infections when I was younger. I think it all started from being sensitive to milk and dairy, and I was having that, and I was getting eczema, and I was getting all these ear infections, and I would get antibiotics for them. And then my mom has this all documented in my baby book, like every time I had these antibiotics and like what was happening. And then there were a couple years where I was like, oh wow, I went like 3 years without having antibiotics. I wonder what happened. And what happened right before that was that I started going to a chiropractor, and I started getting my, getting adjusted. And in kids, the eustachian tube, which is what drains your middle ear, like the fluid, when fluid builds up in your ear, it's your middle ear, your eustachian tubes, which drain that fluid into your throat. When you're a kid, they're parallel to the ground. So they don't really drain very well with gravity. As you age, they start to point down because you grow and get bigger. So that's why little kids are very, very susceptible to ear infections. So I just want to throw this out there in case anyone's kids...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I learned that in speech therapy school. It's a couple of things I keep from that. So it's really helpful for kids to get adjusted because you can adjust their skull, so it helps drainage of that middle ear. So imagine all these times, like if I had changed my diet, if I had gotten chiropractic care, I probably could have eliminated like 25 rounds of antibiotics in my life. And so, they can kill off permanently. I mean, it's like an atomic bomb, I've heard, for your gut. And I just took some recently, and I still feel like I have some like lingering sinusy thing. I'm like, these antibiotics prevented me from killing off what I thought. It's just a mess. So if you can avoid antibiotics, or if you can wait it out to see if you can try something else, definitely do it. Don't go for that as the first line of defense if you don't have to. But then, they can cause serious damage. So thank you for sharing that.
They can. Yeah. And just, I would say, like, I would never take them as a precautionary. So sometimes people will prescribe them, like you'll get dental work done and they're like, we're going to give you an antibiotic just in case. I would never take the just in case, by the way. So I would only take it if there's a confirmed infection that is like really dramatic, right? Yeah. I personally, again, like people can consult their doctor, and I'm not telling you medical advice, but based on all the research I've seen, the microbiologists I've talked to, they would all say, really try to avoid them at all costs. Like if you have strep throat, to be honest, your body will like get rid of that typically on its own,
Tell that to my tonsils that got removed in 2004.
No, you can't get them back.
I can't get them back, and I got allergies the next year. I got my tonsils out. I got strep throat 6 times in a year. I had to take antibiotics all those times, and I was becoming resistant to amoxicillin. So I had a round of amoxicillin, and I did it, and I got strep throat again. It was the first day of a cruise, and so I was sick on the cruise. I had to like go to the infirmary in the ship and get more antibiotics. And I mean, this was my life back then. Like I talk to you guys now, and you probably don't think about me as being sick. I was a mess for so long.
Yeah, so was I.
Yeah. And so I got these antibiotics, and then I got my tonsils out my senior year. It was terrible, and then I got really bad allergies and asthma and sinus infections the next year because it interferes with your immune system, and then have the gut issues on top of it. It just sets the stage for these things to happen. So I'm sorry, I'm jumping in.
Well, no, I thank you for bringing that up, because you showed a really good picture of this is why I usually recommend people don't try antibiotics, is because what happens is you think you're doing, okay, I'm getting rid of this infection, but I want people to pay attention. What I call as whack-a-mole, okay? So you get rid of one infection, and then guess what usually happens in the next 6 months?
You get another pop-up infection.
You get another infection
from something else because you just killed some guys, and then these other guys get stronger, or like
yes.
Whack-a-mole.
So you create weakness in the microbiome. Like you said, you do drop an atomic bomb, right? So one dose of antibiotics has been shown to kill at least 1/3 of the gut microbiome. 1/3. 1/3. So think about this, okay? So again, I don't know who we're killing, right? We just kill guys. Like, just so you guys know, most broad spectrum antibiotics like amoxicillin, they're broad spectrum. So that means they're not just going after bad guys. They're going to kill good guys too, 100%. There's really not many antibiotics that are narrow spectrum. There is some, but like it's confusing. But anyway, but most of what people are using are broad spectrum, like amoxicillin, okay? the thing about it is if I just drop a bomb and I kill all these microbiome that are responsible for immune function, okay? So they're responsible to communicate with your T cells, which tells your body what to attack, what not to attack. They're going to communicate with lymphocytes. They're going to communicate with all white blood cells. Like they're all in communication. They really run the show with our microbiome and our immune system work together. So every time you're doing antibiotics, you lessen your immune system, right? You hurt it. It's less stable. Think about an army and you just killed a third of your army. You're very vulnerable. You're very vulnerable. So then you get another infection and then they're like, oh, another dose. And I see people go on this very negative cycle where their microbiome is just getting worse and worse and worse and they keep getting infections. So that's where I'm like, dude, you gotta start replenishing your microbiome. Like you've got to start getting on spores. You need to start, getting on the right fibers and prebiotics because like you're just decimating your soldiers. They're just gone. And then you're going to play whack-a-mole. So then you're going to be like ear infection, yeast infection, this infection, and you're just playing whack-a-mole. It's like, isn't that annoying? Like I would want that to end eventually,
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. You're painting such a good picture of how it just really does happen in real life.